Memories. It's been 6.5 years since Leave triumphed, of course, in the EU referendum by that margin of 52 to 48, in case you forgot. So rarely discussed, after all. It's almost 3 years since the UK did officially leave, which actually coincides, by the way, with the beginning of the pandemic. Not saying they're related, but I just getting nostalgic about these memories. It was, if you remember, described by Boris Johnson as an oven-ready deal. And it's almost exactly 2 years, in fact 2 years is Saturday, since Boris Johnson trumpeted his post-Brexit trade deal, which he said was the biggest trade deal yet, worth £660 billion, which he declared will, if anything, allow our companies and our exporters to do even more business with our European friends. Now, as The Guardian today note, he falsely claimed there would be no non-tariff barriers to trade. But you know what? I know. It's such a rare slip from that paragon of honesty and integrity, Boris Johnson. Because he's a first-time offender, we'll just let it slide. Anyway, how's it all going? Shall we have a little look-see, see what's going on? Important to judge in its own terms, after all, which is why a new report by the British Chambers of Commerce is important. So they surveyed more than 1,000 business leaders. Now, 77% said the deal wasn't helping them increase sales or expand. 56% said they'd experienced problems complying with the new rules for exporting goods. 45% reported issues trading in services. It's problems like dealing with EU rules on VAT, problems with custom rules, limits on business travel. Now, because of these problems not being resolved, according to the BCC, EU traders are just going to go elsewhere, which will then just keep compounding the economic problems that this country faces. Now, part of the issue, there was a standoff over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Bit of an oversight, not focusing on that issue during the referendum campaign, if we're going to be honest with you, given the Good Friday Agreement, which stopped a conflict, which killed about 3,500 people, was based on there being an open border between North and South. And obviously, if you have the North and the South, one in the EU and one outside the EU, with therefore different rules, then you're going to have a problem, which is why you end up with a protocol. Anyway, there's a big standoff there, and that means, until that's sorted out, the relationship won't be stabilised. They did threaten a trading war under Liz Truss. I mean, she was halfway to declaring France at one point, to be fair. But that's calmed down a bit and there's negotiations going on. Now, this all comes as a report from the Centre for European Reform suggests Brexit shaved 5.5% of the economy. It cost £40 billion in tax revenues, which is a fair whack, if I'm going to be honest with you. Quite a lot of nurses could be paid with that, I would say. Let's talk about this. Now, some might actually have noticed, well, you have noticed because I read your comments and some of you complain about this, that I'm not always very enthusiastic about talking about Brexit on this channel. There is a few reasons for that. One, I did not like the culture war that the referendum unleashed. My understanding of politics is broadly based on class, which is who has wealth and power and who doesn't. I believe you're on a collision course there, the majority versus that tiny minority. The referendum campaign, well, particularly its aftermath, if we've got honest, redefined people as leavers and remainers. And I didn't like that at all, because it became these cultural identities, which, as though, a supermarket worker in Hackney, a single mum who voted Remain, was somehow aligned with the head of Goldman Sachs or David Cameron, who also voted Remain, or a former miner in Derbyshire had something in common with Jacob Rees-Mogg, just because they both voted Leave. Didn't believe that. So I didn't like the way it opened up these ridiculous and terrible divisions in British society. Secondly, I'll just be honest, I need to be very sensitive here because this will upset some people. There's a category of people I would describe as ultra-Remainers. Not all Remainers. I'm a Remainer. I campaigned for Remain. Annoys people, some people, well, those people, and I point that out, because most of them didn't do any campaigning during the referendum campaign. They only started campaigning when it was a little bit too late. I voted for Remain. I had problems with the European Union. I set out a case of why the left should debate leaving the European Union about a year before the referendum campaign. That was very clear. The reasons to stay in the EU, Remain and reform. Because I didn't like the anti-migrant nature of the referendum campaign, because it would embolden the most reactionary elements of the Conservatives. That's why I campaigned for Remain. But ultra-Remainers, it reminds me of a old Christian friend who often said the worst thing about Christianity is Christians. And this applied for ultra-Remainers, who became, some of them, the most radicalised, ridiculous people online you'd ever come across. systematically alienated Leavers. They did not care about winning over Leavers over, who they generally just treated as completely thick and stupid. They went down all these stupid loopholes, basically, of just saying, instead of convincing Leavers, they'll just treat the referendum campaign as completely illegitimate. The Russians did it. It was an advisory referendum, as though a constitutional technicality overturns the fact that we all had leaflets shoved through our doors by the government telling us that whatever the referendum result was, it would be abided by, and parties in Parliament voted for that to happen. And then, they waged this guerrilla warfare against the Labour leadership because they were obviously, a lot of them, more interested in hating the left than actually staying in the European Union. Gloria De Piero, who would call herself a Blairite, but she represented a Leave constituency, and she told me that some of those supposedly ultra-Remainer MPs actually were quite interested in using it as a wedge issue to attack the Labour leadership. And also, they'd go on, they'd be like, oh, Jeremy Corbyn's a Brexiteer, but then Rory Stewart they'd embrace as one of their own, even though he was campaigning for Theresa May's Brexit. Because these people are all vibes and not substance, by the way. And they also now go on about they love Keir Starmer, even though he's backed Boris Johnson's Brexit deal and is basically trying to out-Brexit the Tories. So anyway, those people are ridiculous in my opinion, and they can call me as many compound swearers as they like, cockwomble, wank spangle. Hilarious, coming from middle-aged people who find those compound swear words hilarious. I said my piece. I clearly don't like them. They don't like me. But they are the worst possible kind of propagators of this cause. So they just deter me from talking about it. Thirdly, I do have a complicated relationship with the EU because, as I've said, I did support staying in the EU. But from kind of neoliberal ideas enshrined in treaties to the way it treats migrants, I have problems. Also, it's got like Hungary in it, which is ruled by a semi-dictatorship, essentially. Fourthly, I don't think most of the UK's problems are caused by Brexit. A certain type of centrist thinks basically everything was fine before 2016, that Britain was some sort of idyllic paradise. They was going about the 2012 Olympic opening ceremonies, which I did like, as though it was some sort of utopia and everything was fine then. Things weren't fine then. There was terrible austerity, stagnating and falling living standards, a financial crash. Much of the country lived in terrible hardship. That's one of the reasons they voted for Leave in the end. So, yeah, I would blame neoliberalism, austerity, dare I say, capitalism for much of the problems of this country. The housing crisis predated this. The lack of workers' rights predated this. The decimation of public services and the welfare state predated this. So I think you can say it's a problem, but without saying it is the only problem, which is what some ultra-Remainers would like us to do. Now, notwithstanding, this deal is not working. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for our society. And the other thing is, the whole point of this was to stop immigration, which I'm obviously very against stopping immigration. I think immigration is a good thing. It's enriched our society, our economy. But what's so kind of ridiculous about it is we did all this economically damaging things because of, above all else, to control the borders, stop immigration. Immigration's higher now than it's ever been. Good, by the way. Brilliant. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's great. But it's just ridiculous that we had a vote which was based, in large part, on stopping people coming into the country. And actually, correctly, we have more immigration than ever, and we've blown up the economy. The whole thing is so ridiculous, which is why 56% say the Brexit was a wrong decision and 32% say it was the right decision. The vast majority of people can see there were no actual tangible benefits in their lives. Now, I would have settled for a closer relationship that Labour opted for before the referendum. We wouldn't be in this mess. Even if you did want to rejoin now and reopen the culture war, which I don't want to do, does the EU want Britain back? And also, what conditions would be applied? Britain did have opt-outs, which I don't think we're going to get back. Over my dead body, are we joining the euro? But, the euro is a disaster, and I'm not going to support that. But clearly, the deal has to be amended. That's what Labour just don't want to talk about that now because Keir Starmer was so associated with Remain, he's worried it'll toxify him and make him, like the Tories will say, oh, see, he wants to stop Brexit. So he's got himself in a mess there. But clearly, this deal is a disaster. It's just a disaster. It's not going to work. It's never going to work. And it needs to be changed and amended. We need a closer relationship with the EU. That won't satisfy some of you. I know you'll be like, well, we need to rejoin. Well, okay, as I've said, I would have preferred it if we stayed in the EU. We're not in that place, but we do need to talk about this deal. It is a disaster, and we need to amend it. That's my thoughts. Please subscribe. Also, press this notification bell. I need to keep reminding people to do this. If you go to it, you can press the notification bell when you do subscribe, so you get all these videos pinging up on your phone or wherever you get them. I do support us on patreon.com/ownjones84. I will see you soon. Lots of love, everyone. Take care. Happy Christmas. Bye.